Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Jewish Gen Talk. As always, we are so glad you're here. We'll get started soon. In the meantime, as always, please put in the chat where you're logging in from. We're always so happy to see people from around the world. Please let us know where you're logging in from, and we'll get started in just a moment. Hey, we have Susan in Portland, Oregon, and Jerusalem, Ottawa, Canada, Seattle, Washington. Madeline, I'm presuming that's Eisenberg, who's saying hello to both of us. We have Susan Rosen from Jewish Gen Press. Welcome.
Susan Roth.
I know.
I saw Newark, New Jersey there. That's a good one.
Avram Krauss in Israel. Kelly Haggart. But it went too fast. I don't know where you are, but welcome. Shelley Polero, welcome.
Brazil, Berlin, I saw, Jerusalem. Wow. All over the world.
Coming in from Vancouver, Los Angeles, Reva Solomon from Florida, Cleveland, Ohio, Denver, Boynton Beach, Florida. Welcome everyone who's joining us. We're going to get started in about a minute. In the meantime, please put in the chat where you're logging in from. It's so wonderful to see people from around the world. We have Richard Gorelnik from San Francisco and Judith Silver from London. We have Erin from Petah Tikva, Ken Enton from San Jose, California. Someone said you got me from Beverly Hills, but I missed your name, but welcome. Hershey, Pennsylvania. We have from Scottsdale, Arizona, I think. Okay, we're gonna get started. We have someone from Antwerp, Belgium. Welcome, BE. We have Gary from Australia. Welcome. That's a tough time right now. Daniel from London. We have Barbell from Salt Lake City. Carrie Zeidman from Las Vegas. And Lynn Oakes from Las Vegas. We are going to get started. Welcome. Let me just put on the live transcription. Okay, here we go. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Avram Grohl, and I'm privileged to oversee Jewish Gen, which is the Jewish Genealogical Research Division of the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust. The museum is located in Lower Manhattan in New York City. If you are not familiar with our location, if you imagine the Statue of Liberty, we are directly across on the water. So welcome all of you. If you're ever in New York, to please come down to the museum. It would be wonderful to meet you in person. Today's talk is part of our ongoing Jewish Gen Talk series of educational webinars. Mark Halpern is joining us today as our guest speaker, and he will be talking about researching our roots in Galicia. This session is being recorded, but you are encouraged to take notes. Mark has also provided an extensive and detailed handout, which was distributed via email earlier, and we will also include the handout in a follow-up email as well. If you would like to ask questions, we'll try to get to them at the end. Please post them in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. You can access at the bottom of the screen. Please do not post them in the chat. As always, you can use the chat to connect with each other, share experiences, but please post questions in the Q&A so that we could go through them at the end of the presentation. Finally, please remember to subscribe to Jewish Gen's YouTube channel so that you can both access previous webinars, but also stay informed when new webinars are added, new videos are added. Subscribe to our discussion group so you can stay informed of future Jewish Gen Talks, and of course, general news and announcements, and share success stories and ask questions of Jewish genealogists throughout the world. A little bit about our speaker today. Mark is someone who needs no introduction in the Jewish genealogy world. He was an international businessman who lived in Japan and Hong Kong in the 1980s. A decade later, while on business in Poland, he visited Białystok, his mother's birthplace, and became interested in his Galitzianer and Polish roots. He is now retired and has worked extensively with JRI Poland, Jewish Gen, the IAJGS, and the Jewish Genealogical and Archival Society of Greater Philadelphia. And he has helped many, many people research their roots. Mark is on the board and executive group and has played a critical role for JRI Poland for many, many years. He's the founder of JewishGen's Galicia group. He's the past president of the Jewish Genealogical and Archival Society of Greater Philadelphia. And Mark was honored as a small token of appreciation in 2018 in Poland with the IHAGS Lifetime Achievement Award. So Mark, we are really glad you're with us today. Thank you for taking the time. And without further ado, I pass it over to Mark Halpern.
Well, thank you all for coming. And I see that there are some old friends, some new friends, and hopefully some future friends that are viewing this. So I'm going to start sharing my screen now, and hopefully this will work. Okay, there we are. I'll put it into presentation mode here. I get it. Okay, I am ready to start. It's a great pleasure to be invited back by Avrami and JewishGen to talk about the vital records of Galicia. I hope to impart some of my knowledge to you, the audience. When I started my genealogical research 25 years ago, many more experienced genealogists shared their expertise with me. How could I pay them back for their help? I, like most experienced genealogists, chose not to pay back, but to pay forward to less experienced genealogists. That's why I'm here. And I expect that some of you will soon be paying forward what you learned from me today. Okay. My father was born in the village of Ploucha in 1903. This photo of my father was taken just before he immigrated to New York at age 18. Ploucha is in eastern Galicia, west of Tarnopol and east of Brezhany. By the time of World War I, my father's older brothers were in New York and another brother was in the Austrian army. My father was 11 when World War I started. During the first years of the war, his village was Austrian, then occupied by the Russians, and later recaptured by the Austrian army. My grandparents had a cellar to keep meat and produce cold and fresh. When the Russians came, the family, my grandparents, my father, and his older sister would hide in the cellar. One day, a group of Russian soldiers came by and found the cellar. It appeared that they wanted to kill these Jews. Fortunately, a Russian officer appeared, dispersed the soldiers, and told my grandfather in Yiddish, Russian Yiddish, to get out and to safety. My grandfather's family and his sister's family left Ploucha to the west and spent the rest of the war years in Hungary. Why do I tell you this story? It is impossible for me to talk about Galician records without feeling the pain of the citizens of Ukraine, some of whom are our relatives. My father's story is being repeated in 2022 in another part of Ukraine, where the Russian army is violently killing and raping non-combatants. I know that in one way or another, we are all deeply troubled by what we see and hear each day. And as individuals, we are doing what we can to support the humanitarian efforts to help the Ukrainian people. While the horrible situation is never far from our minds, we continue our efforts to learn about our family who lived in many of the same cities under attack at this very moment. That might make this lecture seem so trivial in some ways. We can only live our lives and help our Ukrainian brothers and sisters the best we can. Now let's talk about Galician records. Genealogy is all about connections, connecting people to other people, connecting people to places, connecting people to historical events, and connections to connections. So even the most obscure connection is of interest to me. Let's keep this in mind as we travel through Galicia. If you find any connections in this talk, or find a connection with me, or just have a question or something that needs clarification, just email me. My email is my name, mark@halpern.com. I apologize, but I have one more story about my Galitzianer family. My father's older brothers, Beryl, Chaim, and Shmuel, were preparing to leave for America in 1909. My family were distillers and innkeepers in Ploucha. In 1910, a law barring Jews from the sale of alcoholic beverages was to go into effect. My father's older brothers made plans to emigrate to America, the land of opportunity. Burrell told the others that when he arrived in America, he wanted a more American name. He thought for a while and told his brothers that he would be called Buck. With that, Chaim agreed this was a good idea and said he would change his name to Chuck. Shmuel thought about this for a while, Buck, Chuck, and he decided to stay in Plaucha-Wielka. But seriously, today I will concentrate on Galician vital records like this one, the birth of my father, Ari Yuda Halpern. I will cover birth, marriage, and death records and how to use them to your advantage. The two most important sources of Galician data are Jewish Records Indexing Poland and Gesher Galicia. Both of these organizations are independent and not part of JewishGen. However, the JewishGen country databases for Poland and Ukraine link to search results from JRI Poland and Gesher Galicia. When you see the results from either database, you are connected to that database. JewishGen also has valuable Galician data, so make sure you also search on JewishGen. Searching all of JewishGen's data using the Unified Search facility is a good starting point. The Unified Search is now on the JewishGen landing page. If there's one thing to take away from this talk, it is to search all relevant databases and generously support those organizations. I will show you how to use available resources to find out whether records exist for your ancestral town and where they can be found. I will show you some records and how to help you interpret them. And I will also talk about two very critical and interrelated subjects, civil versus religious marriages and the legitimacy of offsprings from those unions, which are very important in understanding your Galitzianer ancestry. This is a map of the Austrian province of Galicia superimposed on a contemporary map. Today, half of Galicia is in Poland and half in Ukraine. Between 1772 and World War I, this was the Austrian Empire. From the end of World War I to World War II, this area was all Poland. After World War II, historical Galicia was split between Poland and the Soviet Union. In December 1991, the split was between Poland and newly independent Ukraine. Zeta was born in Austria, died in Poland, and is buried in Ukraine, and he never left Tarnopol. Throughout the early period of Austrian rule, the government worked very hard to assimilate and Germanize the Jews. In their efforts to identify and tax Jews, it was mandated that Jews adopt German surnames by the beginning of 1788. All Galician vital records include surnames. Before we go any further, I think we should discuss the one immense matter that confounds and frustrates Galitzianer researchers. This is the way the Austrian crown dealt with Jewish marriages. I will talk about two critical and interrelated subjects, civil marriage and the legitimacy of offspring. Early in their rule, the Austrian crown hoped to restrict the growth of Jewish population in Galicia. They implemented many requirements for Jewish marriages. Jews needed official permission to marry. A marriage tax was levied that could cost anywhere from 3 to 10% of the groom's father's income. This tax would double on each male sibling's subsequent marriage. Later, the Austrian authorities sought to limit Jewish marriages by decreeing that no Jew could marry unless they passed an exam in religion based on German catechism. The Hasidic movement spread rapidly through Galicia in the 18th century. Roughly 6 out of 7 Galician Jews were Hasidim. Marriage became an area of great contention between the crown and the community's Hasidic leadership. For civil marriage, the crown designated 1 or more rabbis in each district to perform marriages. For the Jewish community, these government-paid rabbis were more secular than the majority Hasidim. The Jewish community was united in resisting the mandate for civil marriage, even though the penalty for not complying with the marriage laws and regulations could mean expulsion from the province. Even though all these restrictive laws and taxes applying only to Jews were rescinded in the latter part of the 19th century, Jews still resisted civil marriage. The result is that many Jewish marriages were never registered with the civil authorities and will not be found in the JRI Poland or all Galician databases. However, in the early 1880s, mass emigration from Galicia commenced. From 1880 up to World War I, 325,000 Jews left Galicia. Those wanted to emigrate or needing to deal with the legal system in Galicia or their new homeland wanted papers with both parents' names and use of their ancestral surname. Galitzianers also became more entwined in the Austrian legal system with activities such as property ownership and inheritance requiring legal status for descendants. What did our Zaydes and Bubbies do? They had a second marriage, a civil marriage, which was officiated by a crown rabbi. Once this marriage was registered, the couple were considered married for legal purposes, but nothing changed within the Jewish community. You can see that the same crown rabbi officiated all four marriages in this 1915 Stree register page. Now you might ask, how does the lack of a civil marriage impact their children and their birth records? As a result of the religious and civil marriage difference, children born to those without a civil marriage were considered illegitimate, born without a legal father. Although this designation had no meaning within the Jewish community, it did matter with the civil authorities for many legal and administrative activities. Compliance with civil marriage registration slowly increased, as did the broader cultural assimilation of the Jewish community. If you are a member of Gesher Galicia, the June 2021 issue of their quarterly journal, the Galitzianer, has an article by former board member Andrew Zalewski entitled Jewish Marriages Revisited. Definitely a worthwhile read. How do you know if your ancestors or relatives were born legitimate or illegitimate? This slide shows two examples. The first is my father's birth record, written in German with the word ehrlich, meaning legitimate. The record below has the German word unehrlich, meaning illegitimate. And in the second record, the father's name was incorrectly recorded in the father's column. The second example is from early 20th century Tarnopol, written in Polish. The first shows the child as slobne, or legitimate, and the second as neslobne, or illegitimate. In the second record, the father's name was correctly recorded in the far right remarks column, which you cannot see, and not the father's column. For births considered out of wedlock by the state, regulations specified how the father's name was to be recorded. Zayda's name was not to be recorded unless he officially acknowledged paternity. So every time Bubby and Zayda had a child, Zayda would go to the vital records registrar and swear in front of witnesses that he was indeed the father. This meant that his name could be listed on the birth record in the remarks column with his signature and that of two witnesses. His name was not supposed to be placed in the father's column, and the child was to carry the mother's surname. If the parents had a civil marriage before the child was born, then the father would be listed in the column reserved for father's information. It turns out that these rules and regulations on how to record the birth of an illegitimate child were not always followed, and the actual recording of these birth events was very inconsistent. In some cases, the mother's maiden name was recorded for the child. In some cases, the father's surname was recorded for the child. But in most cases, no surname was identified for the child, as you can see on this illustration. Okay. Before we go further, I will share a brief history of Jewish vital records in Galicia. This chart is also included in the handout. An imperial decree in 1784 mandated civil registration of vital records. For Jewish records, rabbis were to maintain the registers. There were no Jewish records recorded in the Catholic registers as occurred in other jurisdictions like Congress Poland. The decree specified a columnar format, separate registers for births, marriages, and deaths, and certain information including house number, legitimacy status, and names of parents. Jewish record keeping apparently started in some towns in 1789. There are some records at Polish and Ukrainian archives that date back to 1789, including for Przemyśl and Kamyanka-Strzemelova, but compliance by local Jewish communities was spotty. All that changed in 1877 when the methods and forms for collection of Jewish vital records were finally formalized by law. If Jewish records for your town survived from before 1877, the records were not standardized and they did not have an abundance of data, some just the barest information. How to find your ancestral town is beyond the scope of this presentation, so I will assume that you already know the names of your Galician ancestral towns. Then how do you determine if the vital records for these towns exist, and if they exist, where they can be found? Jewish records for many towns have survived. Inventories of available Jewish vital records can be found on Gesher Galicia website and on Miriam Weiner's Routes to Roots Foundation website. JRI Poland's new website is a work in progress. A complete inventory of Galician records will be added. A full inventory of all types of records for Galician towns can be found on Miriam Weiner's Routes to Roots Foundation website. This not only includes vital records at the Polish and Ukrainian archives, but vital records held by civil records offices in Poland. Also, other types of records with genealogical value are listed by type and their repository noted. More recently, Miriam Weiner has added a surname database of over 2 million records, most of which are unique. This database includes records for many Galician towns now in both Poland and Ukraine. Also new are high-resolution maps that have been added, some for the areas of Galicia, worth a look for Galician researchers. Susan Wind has provided the best finding aid to locate where your Galician town's records were registered. In the 1870s, there were about 6,000 towns and villages where Jews lived. In 1875, these towns were organized by registration district and subdistrict. Vital records were registered in all district and subdistrict towns. All registration towns, except for Lvov and Krakow, were registration locations for other nearby towns and villages. Susan located the manual published by the Austrian Justice Ministry, which identifies the Jewish registration district and the towns in each. The list of towns has been alphabetized and listed along with its district and subdistrict. This list is published in Susan Wind's book as Appendix F. My father was born in the village of Plaucha, and Appendix F shows me that in 1877, those Jewish records were registered in the nearby town of Kozlov. If you are researching Galician Jewish vital records, start with JRI Poland's Town Explorer. JRI Poland has indexed 1.6 million Galician vital records from the various branches of the Polish State Archives for nearly 150 registration towns. Go to the JRI Poland homepage and log in. Then click on Town Explorer. Then start entering the name of your registration town. The drop-down menu will show your options. Click on your town. JRI Poland has embarked on a complete overhaul of our website and the database search functionality, as well as adding a data management system. The website development team, under the leadership of board member Robin Magid, are working hard on this all-new website. The complete information for all towns is not yet available. Please use the Contact Town Volunteer Leadership button to find out the status of indexing for your town or to communicate your questions or comments to the JRI Poland expert on your town. If your registration town is not listed, send an email to questions@jripoland.org. The Gesher Galicia website provides some outstanding information for researchers. Their website is a treasure trove of information specifically geared for Galitzianer researchers. Since I am talking about inventories, let me spotlight the inventories of Galician vital records for the state repositories holding vital records. This menu tab shows that you can search for your town's records. I am searching for vital records for the Galician town of Tarnopol. The result of this search lists all of the records for my town, the type of record, and the years included. The inventory also provides links to online images when they exist and identifies whether there is an online index and which organization created the index. This is an excellent resource for Galician researchers. The results of Gesher Galicia's Shemesh Identification Project is an exciting new resource for Galician researchers. In late 2019, Gesher Galicia embarked on a collaborative project with the Shemesh State Archive to identify a set of registers held in Shemesh, nearly all of which were index books of Jewish vital records from towns in the former province of Galicia. However, the towns of origin were unknown. The project is now complete with identification of 582 index books for 71 Galician towns. The list can be found on the Gesher Galicia website. It identifies where these files contain new data not available in any archive. Images of these index records are available to Gesher Galicia members only, and indexing of the data has commenced. Here are 3 pages of a Kolomeyer birth index book covering births for surnames starting with B from 1920 through 1942. This is a great resource. I use it often. In your search, always use both the JRI Poland database and Gesher Galicia's database. Where the vast majority of JRI Poland's entries are vital records from archives in Poland, Gesher Galicia has a wider scope capturing indices and extracts of property, tax, school, and other records. Gesher Galicia does have over 500,000 vital records for about 60 registration towns, majority of which are sourced from the Ukraine State Archive in Lviv. There is very little overlap between the database contents of Gesher Galicia and JRI Poland. I urge you all to use both resources and support both as well. Before 1877, there were no standard form headings. The headings were in Latin, Polish, or German. They differed from town to town and year to year. This changed in 1877 when headings were standardized and provided in both Polish and German, as shown here. Registrars could record these vital events in either Polish or German. JRI Poland has translated these headings to English, and there is a link in the handout I provided. Registrars were required to record the information either in Polish or German. Now let's turn our attention to the actual records and what you may find in them. Records from before 1877 have limited information, and the formats and fields of the data are not consistent. I will show a few examples. This 1824 Tarnopol birth record is in columnar format, but has no headings. The records include the child's full name, house number, sex, legitimacy status, father's given name, mother's given name, and mother's father's given name. Just a note of caution in using these pre-1877 birth records. You will find that many of the births are recorded as legitimate. Don't believe it unless you can find a civil marriage. It appears to me that the registrars did not know the status and decided to check off legitimate as their default. This 1858 Husiaten marriage record has very little information, including here are the names of the bride and groom and their father's names. That's it. Most pre-1877 marriage records have very limited information. Older death records also do not have a great deal of family information. This 1872 Kopachinci record lists the name of the deceased, date of death, the house number where the death occurred, sex, age of death, at death, and cause of death. Now let's turn our attention to vital records starting in 1877. This is a whole new world of recording. We will start with the records that have the least genealogical information and work our way toward those with the best information and information that will surprise you. Death records have the least amount of family information. Starting in 1877, death records were to include date of recording, page of entry, name of examiner, exact time and place of death, day and place of burial, name of deceased, marital status, occupation, town of residence, sex, age, and cause of death. Excuse me. What names other than the deceased are usually recorded on a Galician death record? This is a typical group of death records from Skalat in 1892. The first entry is for a 36-year-old male. For men, the only information usually provided are his name, occupation, and town of residence. The second entry is for a 9-year-old child. For children, the names of a parent or both parents and their town of residence are usually recorded. The last entry is for my great-great-grandmother, who died of old age at 70. I really do not think now that 70 is old anymore. For married women, their death record usually shows only their husband's name and town of residence. However, it always pays to view the record, as there may be more information. In Galician records, exceptions abound. So 70 was considered old in 1892. Today, the oldest person alive and the fourth oldest ever in history is Lucille Randon, a nun also known as Sister Andre. She was born in southern France in February 1904. She is also the oldest person to ever contract and survived COVID when she was 1 month short of her 117th birthday. A miracle. This is the 1907 Kamyanka death record for Chaye Fege Eisenberg, who died at age 112. Yes, she lived to be 112, 115 years ago. She was born about 1795. Her parents were Leib and Rebecca Ehrlitz, who were both born before Jews adopted surnames. From the JRI Poland database, we found that Chaye Fege's husband, Hirsch Leib, predeceased her by 22 years at the young age of 96. War engulfed the Polish lands, including Galicia, during World War I from mid-1914 through late 1918, and then during the Polish-Soviet War from early 1919 to early 1921. The results of these conflicts can be seen in records starting in 1915 through 1921. This April 1920 Buchach death record is one example. Jenta Horn, nee Sommer, died at age 45 by a bullet to the heart. By 1920, Austrian Galicia was now southern Poland, and the German headings in this record have been crossed out. By now, all Galician records were recorded in Polish. Next up are marriage records. You will recall that your ancestors' marriage record might not be found, as most Jews had religious or ritual marriages that were not recognized by the Austrian crown and could not be recorded in the civil marriage registers. Civil marriage records starting in 1877 were to include for both bride and groom their name, place of birth, occupation, place of residence, parents' names, age, and marital status. Also, date and location of marriage, signature of a civil official, his title and his place of residence, and witnesses' names and places of residence. When couples or their children had a need for a civil marriage, second marriages in front of a crown rabbi were arranged. This is a 1934 Borislav civil marriage of 82-year-old Leib Schreiber to 70-year-old Bela Gruft on November 6th. What event or events compelled the civil marriage? Well, Leib died 41 days later in Borislav on December 17th of old age. So it is likely that inheritance of his estate compelled this marriage. Without the civil marriage, neither his wife nor children could be legal heirs to his estate. Many marriage records have good genealogical information. Let's look at this 1896 marriage from Tarnopol. The groom, Jakob Schwadron, was born in Burstin and lives in Zlochev, the son of Isaac and Pessy. The bride is Ida Halpern, born in Skalat and living in Tarnopol, the daughter of Jacob and Rebecca. That is a lot of information, but the notes show more. The third note verifies the completion of the groom's military service. Here is another line of research. And the fourth note is certification for the groom from the rabbi of the town of Zaborov. We can surmise that the groom has connections or roots in Zaborov. Here are a few interesting marriage records. This is a 1931 Drahovich civil marriage of Antony Kazimierz Sovchinsky, age 25, son of Michal Sovchinsky and Teodos Harikai. Already you are wondering about the groom. The record shows that Antony converted under rabbinic supervision from Roman Catholicism to Judaism and changed his given name to Abraham. His bride is Rachel Bernstein, age 21, daughter of Henny Rose Bernstein and Abraham David Bergman. The bride Rachel is recorded with her mother's surname, indicating that her parents did not have a civil marriage recorded. There are many towns in eastern Galicia where records from before World War I were destroyed during that war. Towns include Buchach, Gvojiec, Halish, Mariupol, Pomrzany, and Sniatin. When people in these towns needed official birth or marriage records, what could they do? Based on the request from the family, the civil authorities recreated official records for these people and those events. This is a Gvojiec civil marriage record created in 1938 for the 1893 marriage of Solomon Shlam, born in 1874 in Gvojiec, and Serla Sperba, born 1875 in Tłumacz. The record even states that Rabbi Nachman Wolf Birnbaum, now deceased, officiated at the wedding. This is a 1928 Buchach marriage record of Kasil Breitling, born 1893 in Berzani, to Mina Fleischman, born 1902 in Buchach. The interesting part of this record is that one of the notes states that Moses Aaron Brecher served as a proxy for Kassiel, who was living in New York City. I had never heard of a proxy marriage before, but they still do exist in some jurisdictions, including some states in America. In the Buchach marriages of 1918 to 1937, I found 3 more proxy marriages which had 2 common threads. In each one, the groom was living in New York City, which is not a surprise. And in each one, Moses Aaron Brecher was the proxy. It's a nice job if you can get it. The last marriage example is for Avrami. It is a 1925 Borislav marriage of 31-year-old Malka Fast, born in Yanov, to 23-year-old Morris Wagman, born in, here's the part for Avrami, Passaic, New Jersey, America, a merchant in Borislav. Since Avrami lives in Passaic, I expect him to trace the lineage of Morris and report back to us. You never know what surprises you might find in a record. Birth records have the most valuable genealogical information. In Galicia, as well as in many other jurisdictions, a person's birth record was used to record changes in civil status of that individual. Therefore, when civil events change the status of a person, a note might be added or appended to the original record. Many of these notes are genealogical gold. I will provide some examples later. Birth records starting in 1877 were to include the date and location of the birth and the bris or naming, the child's name, sex, and legitimacy status, the father's name, occupation, and place of residence, the mother's name, civil marriage status, occupation, parents' names, and place of residence, signatures of the official or witnesses and their places of residence, signature of the mohel and his place of residence, signature of the midwife and her place of residence, and report of stillbirth or infant death if applicable. On my Uncle Chaim's birth record, I have highlighted the 2 columns for house numbers. the first being the house number of the birth, and the second, the house number of the bris. You will also find house numbers on death records signifying the place of death. It appears that registrars from the earliest records through the 1930s recorded the house number or address of births and deaths. You should always note the house number, as they also are recorded in tabular registers, notary records, property records, and homeowner lists. House numbers can be used to track movements of your ancestors, to identify or confirm possible connections between families or family names, and possibly to locate the ancestral home of your family. 2 warnings in using house numbers. House numbers in sequence are not necessarily near each other. Once the numbers were established, new houses were assigned the next sequential number, no matter the location. And the second warning is that the house numbers in records are not necessarily the place of residence. They are the place of birth, the place of bris, or the place of death. This is a typical entry for the father. It provides his name, his occupation, and his town of residence. Remember, when the parents did not have a civil marriage, the father's name should not be recorded, or his name and statement of paternity should be in the far right remarks column. Very seldom will you find more information about the father, but it's always worth looking at the record. It is always worth looking at the record. There are always exceptions. The father's entry of this 1878 Zurovno birth record reads, Luta Rice, married son of Abraham Hirsch and Rivka from Zurovno, a peddler in the town of Zurovno. The mother's parents' names, occupations, and place of residence are almost always recorded. So try and find records where the mother's family is important to you. This 1885 Sambor birth reads, Rosa Turk Mamalas, wife of Samson Mamalas from Sambor and daughter of Hirsch and Dina Turk from Baranovsha. When a person's birth record was used to record changes in civil status for that individual, notes would be added to the birth record, as you can see in this illustration. Many of these are genealogical gold. Here are a few examples. I will repeat again, always look at the record. This is a page from the 1901 Tarnopol birth register. The first record shows that Usher Horowitz died in February 1902. The second record shows that in 1915, the parents of Gittel Spiegelglass presented their Vienna marriage certificate to the registrar, thus changing Gittel's status from illegitimate to legitimate. The third record shows that Max's parents, Mendel Jaeger and Bela Ehrenkrantz, had a civil marriage registered in Tarnopol in April 1903, making Max legitimate. The fourth record shows that Henny Schifre Adlerstein was married in Tarnopol in 1927, and that record can be found on page 118 of the marriage register for that year. The fifth record shows 2 subsequent events for David Leib Schwartz, the 1914 civil marriage of his parents and his 1928 civil marriage. Each one of these 5 records has been amended, but do not expect that every record will contain new facts. In my experience, maybe a quarter to a third of these records will have some notations. This record is the 1911 Kolomaya birth of Eliash, son of Shulam Hilsenrad and Tauba Weinreb. The note states that in November 1953, after the war, Eliash changed his given name to Massier and his parents' given names to Simon and Antoinette. Were his parents alive or deceased when their son changed their names? The note to the left may show the reason for the name change, as Eliash married Dorota Freilich in September 1953. Was Dorota Jewish? Did Eliash convert? We do not know that yet. This record is a 1907 Drohobych birth of Artur, the legitimate son of Dr. Mordko Senenseb, an attorney, and Leonie Trachtenberg. In 1919, the record was amended. Now, he was only 12 years old at the time. Arthur's name was changed to Tadeusz Szyniecki, and he converted to Roman Catholicism. This set of birth records were recorded in Komarno in 1935. These 3 births were supplemental births or delayed registrations. Registered were Jacob, born in 1903, Baruch, born in 1904, and Marcus, born 11 years later in 1915. The mother is Chaye Schaffer. No father is recorded. You will find that most, if not all, delayed birth registrations do not use the columns to record the event. The registrar writes the information in paragraph form. On the next page, the late registration continues for the 1912 births of twins Moses and Bluma. Mother is Chaye Schaffer, again, but these twins have a father, Isaac Strasser. Covering all 5 births, the record also states that Chaye and Isaac had a civil marriage in 1916 in Lvov, making these children legitimate. I did a search of Chaye and Isaac and found they had more children who were registered soon after they were born. They were Golda in 1905, Shepsel in 1907, Laser in 1908, Abraham in 1910, and the twins, Moses and Bluma, were already registered in 1912. Why did they not register the first 2 births and the last birth, but registered the 6 in between? And why did they register their twins twice? The descendants may never know. Okay. My great-grandparents, Meyer and Taube Tenenbaum, who lived in Tarnopol, registered all their sons when they were born, but did not register their daughters until 1908. This is an example from the Tarnopol 1870 birth register. This page records 1870 births delayed to 1898 through 1908. The last record on this page is my grandmother Ronya, the oldest child of Meyer and Taube Tenenbaum, who was 38 by this date and had brought 10 children into the world. Why were the female children registered so late? I do not know. Sometimes delayed registrations were recorded in a special register, sometimes in the register of the year it was recorded, and sometimes at the back of the register for the actual birth year, like this one. Now that you have seen the records and understand that having the actual record is so important for your genealogical research, let's see how you can obtain a copy. The Polish State Archive is in the midst of a project to digitize all vital records at all archive branches. Some archives, such as Agad, Przemyśl, and Tarnów, are moving ahead rapidly and have many scans online. Others, like Krakow and Rzeszów, are moving fairly slowly. When JRI Poland learns that new record images are online, we create links to the folder for that town, to a nearby web page, or to the web page containing the actual image. The Polish State Archives, through their National Digital Archive branch, has set up a common website to host these images. Up till now, the regional archives have chosen either to use this website or to set up their own website. Agad has chosen to set up their own website. Przemyśl has used a combination of their own website and the common website. The other regional archives in Galicia use the common website. Let's first look at the Agad website. Okay. Researchers first need to identify a record of interest, which I did here. This is a result table for the town of Przemyślany, now in Ukraine. I was intrigued by this one entry where the father's name was Tenenbaum and the mother's name was Halpern, the surnames of my paternal grandparents. I have a great interest to see this record to determine if they are part of my family. The record is AKT number 42, or the 42nd birth recorded in 1906. The image link on the left entry says view nearby image. I click that link. The record image that pops up shows 1906 births, AKT 33 through 36, but I am looking for number 42. So using the navigation arrows at the bottom of the frame, as seen here, I move ahead 2 images and I find record number 42. Except for Algod records, the vast majority of Galician records and also records from other areas of Poland will be found on the website run by the National Digital Archives, szukajwarkiwok.gov.pl. JRI Poland has created a guide to using the National Digital Archive website. There's a link to this guide in my handout. However, the website is now down. Apparently, this website had a malware attack or a possible malware attack and has been down for over a month. The Polish State Archive have brought up the website for domestic access, and we hear that international access should be restored, hopefully within 2 weeks. In the future, when record images are found on the NDA website and direct links are not available, the heading of the search results table will have the following message. Eventually, all the index records will be directly linked to their images. But in the meantime, you can find folders with all currently available images here. Here is a link to the folder like this one for the town of Przemyśl. Click on the list of units to find the inventory. Line items with the number of scans other than 0 will have images of records. So click on one of those items. I clicked on 1900 to 1902 births and has 855 images. A group of thumbnail images of the records appear. Now comes the hard part. You must use the year of the record and its AKT number to find that record and download it. The more you practice, the easier the procedure will be, but it is still a trial and error process. Okay, I'm going to skip over this. Hopefully you can see this in the handout, some of this. Okay, I want to summarize. And I want to share with you my 6 rules of Galician research. Rule number 1, always use both JRI Poland and Gesher Galicia in researching Galician family. Add to this the surname database on Merriam-Webster's Routes to Roots Foundation website and JewishGen's country databases. Rule number 2, make an effort to understand and then consider the civil versus religious marriage issue when evaluating the record. Number 3, beware. The ways that events were recorded were inconsistent between towns and between registrars in the same town. 4, rule number 4, beware. Events were recorded by humans with information provided by humans. Mistakes are made. Try and verify all information. Rule number 5, always look at the record. Repeat, always look at the record. Even the most complete index may not record all the key facts, and the index may be wrong. You do not want to miss any surprises. And rule number 6, be a detective. Look for those connections. I have one last record for you to see. This is the 1892 Lvov birth record of Grover Cleveland Blumenthal. Yes, Grover Cleveland Blumenfeld, not Blumenthal, Blumenfeld, born in 19th century Lemberg, son of Zygmunt or Samuel Blumenfeld and Carola Buber. The record states that both parents lived in Chicago, explaining the naming of their son. But why was he born in Lemberg? For those who do not know about Grover Cleveland, because we have a lot of people from outside the United States here, he was the president of the United States from 1885 to 1889, and then again from 1893 to 1897. I wonder if a baby born today in Lviv might be called Joseph Biden Katz, or maybe Yair Lapid Goldberg, he's still the prime minister, or maybe Volodymyr Zelensky Rappaport. The original Grover Cleveland was born in Caldwell, New Jersey, and lived there for the first 4 years of his life. He was the most famous person ever to live in Caldwell. Who was the second most famous person to live in Caldwell? And I would guess that not many of you would know this. Fictional mob boss Tony Soprano. He was part of the mafia in New Jersey, who lived in North Caldwell. He was patterned after Richard the Boot Bayardo and his son Anthony Tony Boy Bayardo, who actually lived in nearby Livingston, New Jersey. And who was the third most famous resident of Caldwell? Well, you guessed it. Your favorite Galitzianer genealogist. This is my obscure connection to Grover Cleveland Blumenthal. But I couldn't let this rest. I could not leave this infant alone. The genealogist in me required that I search him out. When I introduced Grover Cleveland Blumenfeld to you, I asked why he was born in Lvov. His mother, the former Karola Buber, was born in Lvov. His parents were married in Lvov, and his mother had family living in Lvov. But as you can see, this wealthy family traveled home to Chicago when Grover was 4 months old. On this ship manifest, Grover's father, Sigmund's occupation is retired merchant at age 39. They also were carrying 12 pieces of luggage. So our Grover Cleveland Blumenfeld was born, as they say, with a silver spoon in his mouth. Grover Cleveland's father immigrated to America in the 1860s with his family. He was a merchant in Chicago. The family name was changed to Bloomfield, and Sigmund became Samuel. He bought the Schwartz Hotel from John Schwartz in about 1898. He and his wife operated the hotel until her death in 1920. That's where their wealth came from. Our subject, Grover Cleveland Blumenfeld, was known as Grover Bloomfield most of his life. He went back to Lvov again in 1913 to get married. Grover received his PhD with honors from Columbia University. He went back to Lvov at least one more time. His only child, Margaret Jane, was born in Lvov in 1924. While Grover worked in Indiana, he was reported to have had a psychological breakdown and retired, moving back to Lake Elkhart, Wisconsin, where his parents had owned a resort hotel. He died by suicide at age 73 in 1965. Daughter Margaret Jane received a bachelor's degree in chemistry from Bryn Mawr College and a master's degree from the University of Wisconsin. She worked as a chemist in California and Delaware before having 2 sons. She lived in Wilmington, Delaware, and died at age 93 in Philadelphia. One of her sons died young, but her other son is still living. He lives in Philadelphia, about 15 miles from where I live. I don't intend to contact him. So this is my presentation, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to stay around and answer your questions. I'm going to stop my share. There we go. Avrami? Where's Avrami? Okay, I guess I'm going to have to look at the questions myself. We're obviously not going to get to all of them. There are 63 questions here, and it'll take me a while to go out of this, but go through this. But if you don't get yours answered, please email me if you have a question. Again, my email is mark@halpern.com, and it's also in the handout. And I have a hard time reading these questions because the chat keeps coming up in front of it. I can move it over. Okay. Will this Scoob Dubin asks, that's not your real name, is it? Will this info help me if my family is from Poltava? No, Poltava was in the part of, is in Ukraine now, but was in Poland between the wars, but it's not Galicia. So you'd have to contact the JewishGen Ukraine Research Division for that. Okay, skip that one. How can I find religious marriage records, not civil marriages, in Galicia? You know, this is from Catherine James. You know, I've never seen one. There are some Kahila records at archives in both Poland and Ukraine. They might have some of those marriage records from that Kahila, but I've never looked at that, and I don't know if they really exist for many towns at all. So it's kind of, you know, you're going to have to kind of search by town to see if it might be there. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts about that, but if you do, maybe you can put it into the chat. Okay. My wife's Austriac family goes back to the early 1800s in Chechnya. Okay, you're not asking about Galicia. Somebody's asking where they can find out about their parents, where great-grandparents, where they came from. Yeah, it's hard, but you got to work backwards from records in the US, mostly passenger list and naturalization records. Where can we find Austrian World War I military records? Also Russian POW records. Well, I don't know the second one, but the first one, I think the records are in, if they exist, if they survived, the records are in Vienna. And there's been a thread on JewishGen recently, and I've copied most of those where it gives some ideas of how to get them. I mentioned that my uncle was in the Austrian army. I need to go look for his records, and I've not done that yet. But if you look back at the JewishGen, their discussion group archive, you probably can find a lot of suggestions from a lot of people who know better than I how to get military records for the Austrian army. Okay, Reba Solomon, please explain what is meant when a record specifies recte. That's the part I skipped next to the name. Recte just means correct or right. So when it says somebody's name is Katz Recte Schwartz, it says that he goes by Katz, but he should go by Schwartz. Recte means correct, should go by Schwartz. These are people that didn't have usually didn't have a civil marriage, and they are using their father's name incorrectly. They should be using their mother's name, rightly using their mother's name. Okay. Somebody named Haberman says, my father was born 1897 in Turka, then Poland, now Ukraine. I have never been able to find any records. There are some records of births, marriages, and deaths for Turka on the JRI Poland website now, but they don't start until I think at least 1900. There are some births up there. I can't remember the exact years, but something like 1905 to 1918. And then there's some marriages and deaths that go from World War I to 1930s or so forth. So look on, do a search for your family name on the JRI Poland database and see what you can find. But probably there is not one for your father in 1897. Okay. Lodge was not part of Galicia. Will this presentation be recorded? Yes, and it'll be put on the JewishGen website. I'm not sure exactly when, but hopefully within the next week.
It will be done later today.
Later today, there we go. Oh, you're there. All
Yeah,
right.
sorry about that. My mic, somehow my wires got disconnected. So my video's off, but I'm back in the background.
You, Jane Pomerantz, you mentioned family had to change their name to German names. My great-grandfather's last name was Licht. Is that a German name? They didn't have to change their name to German names. They had to take a German name in 1788, unless they already had an ancestral surname. If they had an ancestral surname that was Polish, they were able to keep that. If they had an ancestral surname that was French or Spanish, they were able to keep that. If they didn't have an ancestral surname, they had to take a German sounding surname, but that was a rule that was probably broken many times as well. And Licht is definitely a German name. Okay. Ellen Sheets says, my family is from Kuti, where there are no vital records that have survived. You believe correctly. My great-grandparents died in the period from 1919 to 1921, and many fled that area in the period because of war. They may have died elsewhere. Where would they have likely gone during the war period? Well, as I said, my father's family went to Hungary. I don't know where in Hungary. I'm going to try to find out. I don't know where in Hungary, but there are some books that show, I'll call them refugees, displaced people who went to Hungary and to Vienna and to Budapest from Galicia and other places within the Austrian Empire. And these books were identified to me by Andrew Zalewski recently. If you want to know more about them, email me and I can send you what he sent to me. And I couldn't find my family in those books. They're online, by the way. They're big PDF files. Alan Baumgarten says, if there is no civil marriages, would a son have been given the mother's surname? Well, legally, yes. But if that person was still called by his father's surname in the town where he was born, and when he came to the United States, he might have used still his mother's surname or his father's surname. In my family, everybody always used their father's surname, no matter whether they had a civil marriage or not, when they came to the United States or other places around the world. Let me see. What is the difference between a surname and a family name? It's the same. Yeah, I would use them interchangeably. How do I get the handout? The handout was in the last email that was sent to you before you came on. I think it was sent about an hour before this started, so about 1 o'clock. So you'll find it connected there.
We'll also include it in the follow-up email.
Okay. I don't get this. Catherine James says, surnames in immigration were birth surnames, at least for minor children. What Austrian immigration records exist and where can they be found? I don't know of any general Austrian immigration records of people leaving from Austria and coming to the United States or any other place around the world that people went to. And I would imagine that 80% of Galitzianers left during that period, 1880 to 1921, they came to America. And there may be some records for specific towns. You'll have to look in Merriam-Weiner's Routes to Roots Foundation website for your town and see if there's anything that even looks like that. How much of what you've explained about civil versus religious marriage records and illegitimate births also applies to neighboring areas just outside Galicia? It probably applies, maybe not in exactly the same way, to areas of the Austrian Empire, such as the area that's now Czech Republic and Slovakia, maybe parts of Hungary, other places that were in the Austrian Empire during that period of time. You'll have to check with the experts in those areas to make sure of how it's applied. Richard Roll talks about his family leaving Spain and ending up in Buchach, and he asks, is there any idea how many Sephardic Jews in Galicia came originally from Spain? I don't know the answer to that. I think that there have probably been articles in the Galitzianer. I'll put a plug for the Galitzianer and membership in Gesher Galicia, because the Galitzianer has some very good articles, and maybe there are articles about that. I don't remember any, but maybe there are something about that. And we have a few people from the board of Gesher Galicia on here. Maybe you want to put that into the chat or the Q&A to answer that question, if you know. Okay. Nina Talbot, who I know is a Kamianka researcher, said he didn't catch what I said about records from Kamianka Stromolova. I'll repeat that. There are some Kamianka records that go back to 1789. They are only death records, and they have been indexed by J.R.I. Poland. Okay. Paul Silverstone says, my grandfather's uncle from Shumsk, Ukraine, married his bride from Brody, which was just over the border in Galicia in 1882. How would an international marriage be handled at the time? I would think that most marriages were at the shtetl or town of the bride. So in this case, the marriage would be in Brody. Unfortunately, the 1882 marriage records for Brody have not survived. The only marriage records from Brody, and this is from my memory, go from, I think, 1815 to 1871. And there are no marriage records after 1871 from Brody that have survived. Again, you may want to look at Brody's Kahila records and see if maybe there are some mention of marriages there. Can you please speak to the friction built up between Galitzianer and Litvak Jewish families? Okay, I'm only going to tell you my experience. My father was a Galitzianer. My mother was a Litvak. My mother didn't like my father's family too much, but she never called them Galitzianers, damn Galitzianers, or backwards Galitzianers, or stupid Galitzianers. I didn't know there was anything between Litvaks and Galitzianers until I started doing genealogy. So maybe somebody else knows better than I do. I don't know the answer, Alan, to this question. What is the status of the Haifa University Galicia Research Project? But I'm sure other people do know. That's a good question to put on the new Gesher Galicia discussion forum. Ask there. Are there any records for immigration to Palestine? I think you're going to have to check in Israel for those. And of course, the IGRA, the Israel Genealogy and Research Association, has a very large database of records from Israel. You have to be a member to get the details on those. Okay. Anne says, often it is hard to read the writing in the actual records. How do you decipher these records and the information they provide? There's always somebody that can read them. That's what I find. I've looked at a lot of them. I'm probably a better reader than the average person of those, but I'm not that good. And so I will ask a native Polish speaker to look at them, or a native German speaker, because some of these records are written in this, to me, indecipherable German. So a good facility to use is, of course, JewishGen's ViewMate, but also if you're on Facebook, a group called Genealogical Translations. Bonnie Burns asked, can you send out the chat? There are too many comments and I can't seem to save them. But I don't know, Avrami, do you want to do that or not?
No, we can't send out the chat. You just have to try the Control A, unfortunately.
Okay. Where can we find the vital records forms with German, Polish headings with English translate Mark used? In the handout, there's a link to that. It's on the JRI Poland website. And it's a PDF, so you can easily print it out and keep it. Okay, well, Alan Baumgarten is asking a lot of good questions. JRI Poland, all pre-World War I Bucharest records were lost. Is there any reason to search other nearby towns for family records? I would say that there are family that, if you have family from Buchach, that there are also families that lived in other towns near Buchach, especially larger towns that were near Buchach. And it's always good to search broader than just for your town in the JRI Poland website database, the JewishGen database, or the Gesher Galicia database. Broaden out a little bit. And also you can look for the town named Buchach in JRI Poland, at least. You just look for town of Buchach, and what you find is the records from other towns that mention Buchach. And if you put your family name in there, you might find a record or two. And maybe your grandfather's brother moved to a nearby town. So I always say, broaden your search as much as possible. There are a lot of records of people who are from Passaic, New Jersey, in Galician records, but also from Russia, from Hungary, from other parts of Poland, like Congress Poland. So you never know. I found some people, not my family, but people from Bialystok in Galician records.
Fascinating.
Okay, Lonnie Rosensteel says, when someone is listed as a witness to the birth, is that a witness to the father attesting to the birth at the time of the declaration? Or was it a specific person, rabbi, present to verify that the child was in fact the child of those parents? It's the former, attesting to the father's declaration that that child was born. Sometimes the father doesn't come for days, weeks, maybe a month to register his child, especially if it was a girl. So I would say, and those witnesses are usually functionaries of the Kahila. They weren't relatives of the persons who had the child. Although you never know. I always say, look at the record, because it could be a relative of the father or the mother. Is it possible to get a copy of the slides used for the presentation? No, but you can look at it online again. Yeah, I'm the only one that gives this presentation. So they are my slides. And in that respect, they are copyrighted. Did I understand correctly the vital records of Kalush were all destroyed? Well, they didn't survive. I wouldn't say they were destroyed, but they haven't survived. And there's always hope. It may be a 1% hope that a register for that town will show up somewhere in a private collection, at a museum, somewhere. It happens every once in a while, but not too often. Okay. Eleanor says, on my grandfather's birth record, his father's name is listed, but on his younger sister's birth record, his name is not there. What does it suggest? To me, it suggests that it was a different registrar that decided that this was an illegitimate birth, and that in one case, I'm going to list the father, and in the second case, I'm not going to list the father. So that's what it, and I'd have to look at the records to see if it was in fact a different registrar. But, as I said, everything was inconsistent, especially when it was a civil record of a civil birth where there was not a civil marriage. It could have been registered any kinds of ways. The father's name could have been placed there, not placed there, placed in the right place, and placed in the wrong place, or actually placed under the mother's name. The mother may say, it may have the mother's name and say ritual wife of so-and-so. And then you'll know who the father was from that. What are the best resources for reading and translating Galician documents? I have done Polish documents just using a dictionary, Google Translate, or this DeepL Translate, and just looking at other records in that group to see if I can figure out what the letters are. If it's the German writing of those ones, I've given up a long time ago on those, and I asked people who know how to read that German writing to help me out. And there are a number of people who know how to do that. And that's why we have our Galician records indexed in Poland by archivists who can read that German.
Mark, maybe we'll do one more question.
Okay. Okay, Tony Hausner says, I see for some towns, birth records at JRI as only up to 1910, while other towns are 1930. Does that make sense? Well, if you're talking about births, we have no birth records from the Polish State Archives that go up to 1930. The latest they would go up to was be about 1918, 1919, because those are the ones that are transferred from the USC. For births, but some only go up to 1910 because the registers containing the births after that probably contain births that were not allowed to be transferred because they were not within the public period. The public period is anything after 100 years for births and anything after 80 years for marriages and deaths. So you'll find a lot of 1930s marriages and death records, but you won't find any 1930s birth records in JRI. And Gesher Galicia, since they're sourcing much of what they have on their database from Ukraine, they have a number of records that go, birth records that go beyond 1920 into the 1930s and sometimes early 1940s. So as I said, you got to search both of them, equally. Start at Gesher Galicia and go to JRI Poland, or start at JRI Poland and go to Gesher Galicia and try to combine them. I wish they were combined, but we're two different organizations and we have two different, two different ways of doing things. What can I say? Okay. Again, if you have any more comments or questions for me, email me, mark@halpern.com. And I'm glad you all came. And I see a lot of names that are familiar to me. And I want to have a shout out to at least one of my friends in Poland who I see, Yale Reisner. Hello, Yale. And thanks for everybody for attending.
Mark, thank you very much. As always, your presentation was clear, well organized, and informative, and even inspirational, and we really appreciate your time today. As mentioned, Mark has prepared an extensive handout, and we will include it in the follow-up email. Mark has also been gracious enough to include his email address if anyone has any follow-up questions. Next week's webinar will be given by Dr. Adina Newman, and her topic will be DNA and endogamy, making sense when your matches don't make sense. A registration link will be included in the follow-up email that will go out a little later today. DNA is a critical resource and tool for Jewish genealogists, and I hope you will be able to join us for this important presentation by one of the leaders in the field. Mark, thank you again, and thank you to all who joined us around the world. Have a good day, everyone, and see you next week.